High noon. Is the war on weed over or just changing? The Obama administration announcing this week that medical marijuana users and dispensaries will no longer be prosecuted if they operate within state laws. Joining us for an exclusive High Noon interview, the drug czar for the Obama administration, Gil Kerlikowske, director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Sir, thank you for appearing on Fox Business and joining our special series this week. We certainly appreciate your time. I have to ask you, with this news coming out of the administration on Monday, do you think, in your opinion, that medical marijuana should be legalized on a national level?
No, legalization is not something that the president nor any of us discuss. It isn't even on the agenda. The states and the guys that are operating with what's called medical marijuana, I think the Attorney General issued some very clear guidelines to United States attorneys. My discussion with law enforcement, the guidelines were well received.
You know, you were the chief of the police department in Seattle, and I can't help but wonder what you would think as the city chief to what the federal government would be doing. Do you want the federal government to make the rules here, or should the states and local communities be the ones that decide whether to legalize or not legalize this drug?
Well, if we're talking about the medical marijuana, I mean, there's no medicine that anybody votes on to say, gee, this is better than another, and let's put it up for a popular vote. Medical decisions should be made through science, and they should be made through the FDA. And it's very clear that the raw marijuana plant is not medicine.
But let me follow up on Tom's question, because when you were police chief in Seattle, you said this direct quote. You said, look, you said arresting people for possessing marijuana for personal use, that's all you said, is not a priority right now, and that basically medical marijuana doesn't pose that threat either. So you, in the past, when you were in Seattle, kind of did seem like you really weren't worried about marijuana use and, you know, overall. Have you changed your opinion since you've joined the administration?
No, I'd say the opinion is exactly the same, and here's the context of that statement. A police department, just like the Drug Enforcement Administration under the Attorney General, we have priorities. Violent crime, large-scale traffickers, all of those things. We have finite resources in the Seattle Police Department or any other, and we use those to go after the most dangerous, the most problematic people. And that's how and we can't go after and do everything all the time. But clearly, marijuana arrests were still made in Seattle.
But Gil, let me ask you this. I want to show the latest Rasmussen polls. They show us on a national level that Americans more and more are supporting the legalization of marijuana. I mean, I don't know if you can see this, but you know, 49% say that they disapprove of legalizing marijuana. This is not even medical, just marijuana, but 41% approve it. And this is a major shift nationally that we're seeing in the polls for those that say yes and say no. I mean, do you look at that and potentially factor that into drug policy going forward?
Well, let's be really clear about what this says and about legalization. Right now, legalization is being sold as a cure to end violence in Mexico. It's being sold as a cure to the state budget problems. It's being sold as a cure to health problems, all of this involving marijuana. You're in the advertising business. If someone was selling you a cure to every single problem with one simple solution, I think you would be very skeptical of that. We already have legal drugs now in this country, pharmaceuticals, tightly regulated, government-controlled, and yet we know that pharmaceuticals, particularly prescription painkillers, are causing untold damage, even though when used properly, they can be very safe and effective.
Yeah, but you know, there's also a cure you missed, and that's the one about the local budgets, state budgets, city, county budgets, and so forth, and it's being sold as possibly a cure-all for that, and everybody in government is looking for an extra dime to try to balance their books. How much pressure do you have on you to try and bend to allow for them to raise some more money by taxing it?
Actually, there's no pressure on me, and there's some very specific provisions in the law under which I operate that said I can't participate or take part in any federal election type of campaign. So in many ways, I have a level of independence that I value and appreciate, although I was appointed by the president and confirmed. I did mention the budget issue, but if you look at, we tax alcohol, we tax tobacco, but if you look at the social and the health care costs that we spend in dollars and cents against the taxes we receive, I don't think there's any comparison that either of these two, alcohol and tobacco, cause untold problems.
Well, I'll tell you what, the differences between the feds and the states continues. There's an assemblyman in Northern California, Tom Amiano, I don't know if you know who he is, but he is pushing, basically saying that we should regulate marijuana, we should legalize marijuana, and we should tax marijuana. And as you know, California, one of the states that, of course, is that has legal medical marijuana for sale. As you see the shift change, do you not think that this is going the way of prohibition in alcohol, and then it's only, frankly, a matter of time before this becomes a bigger national discussion?
Well, no, I don't in many ways. I think when we talk about this legalization issue as some type of cure for a state budget, it really is not, because we know we spend a lot of money on health care costs for people involving alcohol and people involving tobacco. So let's not try and put this in the guise that this is going to solve a budget problem. It's not.
Well, they are making a lot of money in California. Really quick before we let you go, I have to ask you, have you had further conversations with Attorney General Eric Holder this week about the marijuana issue in particular, and what do you see as the next step in this?
Well, I think that the guidelines that he issued, and we both addressed the International Association of Chiefs of Police last week in Denver, Colorado. I think the guidelines are very specific, and they're quite helpful to the United States attorneys. And frankly, they're helpful to the local officials also, because it said that, look, marijuana patients are not going to be a core priority, but all of the dispensaries, all of the trafficking, selling to underage people, violation of money profit making in these dispensaries, I would be very concerned. And for those states that are considering medical marijuana, they should look very carefully at what's gone on in California with their eyes wide open.
Yeah, and going back to this whole business about the polling that we have, you know, it's been, what, 30, 40 years that people have been talking about legalizing marijuana without getting much traction. But all of a sudden, Chief, these numbers are starting to look rather dramatic, where it's split pretty much fairly close to down the middle on whether or not they want to go for it. Do you feel like you're fighting an uphill public relations battle with the voters?
Well, no. I think that the legalization community is very strategic. They're very well funded. They have offices in many states. But I think that I have never met a parent who's had a daughter or son who was addicted or was being treated for a problem, including marijuana, which we know that there are a vast number of calls to helplines from people only from the use of marijuana. I've never heard from one of them saying, gee, things would be so much better if it was legal.
Gil Kerlikowske, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your time on Fox Business.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you back. It's a great issue, sir, and thank you for joining us. All right, our week-long High Noon series wraps up tomorrow. We are going to speak to the Executive Chancellor of Oaksterdam University. Believe it or not, it's a cannabis trade school that's out in California. We're going to learn what students are taught about growing pot and owning and running their own marijuana dispensary. High Noon, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Fox Business.